My beloved child, stop apologizing for surviving. Sit with those words for a moment before you move on to whatever comes next in your day. You have said sorry for things that were never sins. You have lowered your voice when your joy made someone else uncomfortable. You have shrunk your testimony because it reminded people of a season they never had to walk through. My beloved child, I did not carry you through the fire so that you would tiptoe around the ashes for the rest of your life. I did not part the water so that you would spend your days explaining why you needed a miracle. Tonight I am asking you to release something you have been holding since the day you made it out alive. There is a quiet guilt that visits the ones who lived when others did not. It visits the ones who healed while someone they loved stayed broken. It visits the ones who walked out of the hospital room, the courtroom, the marriage, the addiction, the grief, and found themselves standing in sunlight while people around them still stood in shadow. My beloved child, if that guilt has followed you, I see it. I see the way you have softened your own healing so it would not look like bragging. I see the way you have said, "I'm just lucky," instead of "God kept me," because the second sentence felt too bold to say out loud in a room full of people who are still waiting for their miracle. But hear me clearly. Your survival was never an accusation against anyone else's pain. Your healing does not put a debt on the people who have not yet received theirs. I do not measure mercy like a container that runs empty when one person receives too much. My mercy is not rationed. When I lifted you, I did not lower someone else. When I answered your prayer, I did not silence someone else's. My beloved child, stop treating your breakthrough like it was stolen from someone who deserved it more. No one earns what I give freely, and no one is disqualified because another soul is still walking through their valley. I want you to remember Joseph in the prison, forgotten by the cupbearer for 2 long years after he had asked to be remembered. When the day finally came for Joseph to stand before Pharaoh, he did not apologize for being lifted out of that pit while his brothers still lived with their guilt untouched. He did not soften his rise to make his brothers' shame easier to bear. He wept for them. He forgave them. But he did not shrink the promotion I had given him just to make their comfort easier. My beloved child, you are allowed to rise even while others are still working through their own story. Their timeline is not your permission slip. Think of how carefully you have edited your own testimony over the years. You have taken the fullness of what I did in you and cut it down into something smaller, something safer, something that will not sting the ears of people who are still angry with me for their own unanswered prayers. My beloved child, I did not ask you to manage other people's disappointment with me. I did not ask you to make my faithfulness quieter so that someone else's doubt could stay comfortable. There is a difference between compassion and shrinking. Compassion weeps with the ones still waiting. Shrinking pretends the miracle never happened at all. You have apologized with your posture even when you never said a word. You have walked into rooms holding your shoulders low, your voice careful, your joy rationed. Because somewhere along the way, you learned that thriving out loud makes some people flinch. My beloved child, I did not design you to live folded in half so that others could stand up straight. I did not carry you through the flood so you could spend the rest of your life whispering about it in case someone thought you were showing off. There is nothing prideful about a healed heart telling the truth about who healed it. Remember the man I healed at the pool of Bethesda, the one who had waited 38 years for the water to stir. When he stood up carrying his mat, some of the very people who should have celebrated him accused him instead. They were more concerned about which day he was healed than the fact that he was healed at all. My beloved child, there will always be people who find a reason to interrogate your miracle instead of receiving it. Do not let their confusion talk you out of your own healing. That man did not lie back down on the mat to make the accusers comfortable. He picked it up and walked because I told him to. I am not asking you to be careless with people's feelings. I am asking you to stop confusing kindness with self-erasure. You can love someone deeply and still refuse to make yourself small for their sake. You can grieve alongside a friend who has not yet received their answer while still standing tall in the answer I gave you. My beloved child, these two things are not opposites. A candle does not dim itself so the darkness will feel less exposed. It simply burns, and its burning becomes an invitation for the room to remember that light still exists. There is a version of you that has learned to introduce your own story with a disclaimer. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, but I know it could be worse, but I'm not trying to make this about me, but My beloved child, I hear the disclaimer before the truth even arrives, and I want you to notice how much energy it costs you to keep softening what actually happened to you. You do not need a disclaimer to tell the truth about your own life. Your pain was real. Your healing was real. Both of those things can exist without an apology stitched to the front of them. Consider the woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, who reached through a crowd just to touch the edge of my son's robe. She did not ask permission from the crowd. She did not wait for someone to tell her that her need was valid enough to interrupt the day. She reached, she touched, and she was healed instantly. When my son asked who touched him, she came forward trembling, and instead of scolding her for reaching without asking, he called her daughter and sent her away in peace. My beloved child, you do not need the crowd's approval to reach for what I have already made available to you. I want to speak now to the specific shape of your apology because I know it is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like over-explaining a decision that never required an explanation. Sometimes it looks like turning down an invitation to celebrate because celebrating yourself in front of others feels indulgent. Sometimes it looks like deflecting every compliment with a joke, because receiving the compliment plainly would mean admitting that you actually did something hard and made it through. My beloved child, deflection is not humility. Humility receives the truth without needing to inflate it or hide it. You can say thank you without a joke attached. I remember Elijah under the broom tree, exhausted, asking me to let him die because he believed he was the only one left who had not bowed to a false god. He was not lying about how tired he was. He was not exaggerating the weight he carried after Mount Carmel. But I did not scold him for his exhaustion. I sent an angel to feed him twice before I asked him to walk another 40 days. My beloved child, sometimes what looks like weakness in you is simply the honest cost of a battle you already won. You do not have to apologize for needing rest after the fire fell from heaven through your life. There is a lie that says the size of your struggle determines whether you are allowed to speak about your survival. If it was not as bad as someone else's story, you learned to stay quiet. If it was worse than what most people could imagine, you learned to stay quiet in a different way, afraid that the fullness of it would make people uncomfortable, or afraid it would make them stop seeing you as anything other than what happened to you. My beloved child, your story does not need to be measured against anyone else's pain to be worth telling. I did not rank the widows at the well or the lepers at the roadside by the severity of their suffering before I noticed them. Remember the 10 lepers who were healed on the road, and only one returned to give thanks. My son did not scold the 9 who kept walking toward their families, toward the temple, toward the life waiting for them. He simply noted their absence and blessed the one who came back. My beloved child, gratitude and apology are not the same thing. You can thank me loudly for what I did in you without apologizing for the fact that I did it. Thanksgiving lifts its voice. Apology lowers its head. I am not asking you to lower your head for a healing that came from my hand. I know some of what you carry is not guilt toward other people, but a quieter fear that if you stop apologizing, you will lose the humility that got you through. My beloved child, humility was never the disclaimer. Humility was the posture of your heart while you were being carried, not the muzzle you place over your mouth after you have already been set down safely. You can walk in humility and still say plainly, I almost did not make it, and I did, and I am not sorry that I am still here. Those two truths. Think about David after Goliath fell. He did not apologize to Saul's army for the fact that a shepherd boy did what trained soldiers were too afraid to attempt. He picked up the giant's own sword and used it, because he understood that the victory belonged to me, and there was no shame in carrying the evidence of it. My beloved child, the evidence of what I have done in your life is not something to hide in your pocket, so other people will not feel small next to it. Some of what you survived is meant to be carried in the open, not as a trophy for yourself, but as proof of what my hand can do. I want to address the people in your life who have, without meaning to, taught you to shrink. Perhaps someone close to you responded to your joy with silence, or your progress with subtle comparison, or your healing with a comment that made you feel guilty for growing past a season they are still living inside. My beloved child, I am not telling you to abandon them. I am telling you that their discomfort with your growth is not a debt you owe them. You are allowed to love people and refuse the smallness they unintentionally ask of you. Love does not require you to stay wounded so someone else feels less alone in their wound. There is also the apology you make to your past self, the strange guilt of having become someone stronger than the person who almost did not survive. You look back at who you were during the hardest season, and some part of you feels disloyal for laughing freely now, for sleeping peacefully now, for trusting again now. My beloved child, becoming whole is not a betrayal of the person you used to be. It is the fulfillment of everything that person was hoping for in the middle of the night when they could not see past the pain. You do not owe your former suffering a continued performance of suffering. Remember Naomi, who told the women of Bethlehem to call her Mara, meaning bitter, because she said I had dealt bitterly with her. She was honest about her grief, and I did not punish her honesty. But her story did not end at that name. It continued into a harvest field, into Ruth's loyalty, into Boaz's kindness, into a grandson who would be counted in the line of a king. My beloved child, the name grief gave you is not the name I am calling you by now. You are allowed to let the bitter chapter close without apologizing to it for moving forward. I know part of what makes this so hard is that survival has become an identity for you, and identities feel dangerous to release even when they no longer serve you. If you have spent years being known as the strong one, the resilient one, the one who always finds a way, then simply resting or simply thriving without effort can feel like you are losing the only version of yourself people know how to love. My beloved child, you were never loved by me only because of your strength. I loved you in the weakest moment you can remember, and I love you in the ease you have not yet allowed yourself to feel. There is freedom waiting on the other side of that fear, but it requires you to test whether people's love for you was ever conditional on your struggle. Some relationships will surprise you and grow even lighter once you stop performing survival. Others may reveal that they were only comfortable with the version of you that needed rescuing. My beloved child, I am not asking you to manufacture struggle to keep people close. I am asking you to trust that the love worth keeping will not require you to stay in crisis to be valuable. Consider Lazarus, 4 days in the tomb, wrapped in grave clothes, called out by name into daylight, he was not expecting to see again. When my son cried out, "Lazarus, come forth," Lazarus did not shuffle out slowly, apologizing for the smell of death that still clung to his clothes. He came out because he was called, and then the people around him were instructed to loose him and let him go. My beloved child, there may be grave clothes still wrapped around parts of your life, remnants of the season you survived, habits of shrinking that have not yet been removed. I am calling you out of the tomb today, and I am asking the people around you, and I am asking you yourself to loose what remains and let it fall. I want to speak plainly about the specific sentence you have rehearsed more times than you can count. I know things could be worse. My beloved child, that sentence has kept you from fully grieving what actually happened to you, and it has kept you from fully celebrating what actually happened afterward. Things can always be worse. That is true of every situation any person has ever survived. But the fact that a harder version exists somewhere does not erase the truth of what you lived through, and it does not disqualify you from receiving comfort for it. You do not need the worst possible scenario to justify your right to be comforted. I remember Hagar in the wilderness, cast out with her son, certain they were both going to die of thirst under a bush. She did not compare her suffering to anyone else's before she cried out. And I heard her. I opened her eyes to see a well that had been there the whole time, waiting. My beloved child, I am not measuring whether your thirst is severe enough to deserve a well. I am simply opening your eyes to the provision that has been near you the entire time you were too ashamed to ask for it. There is a particular apology I want to address now, the one you offer for taking up space in a room after you have healed. You have learned to make yourself smaller in conversations, so that people who are still struggling will not feel like you are showing off your peace. My beloved child, your peace is not a performance aimed at anyone. It is the fruit of a long night I walked you through, and it does not need to be hidden under a bushel to make the room feel safer for someone else's storm. You can hold your peace quietly, without hiding it, and let it simply exist beside someone else's pain, without demanding they match it. I think of the disciples in the boat during the storm, terrified, waking my son from sleep and accusing him of not caring that they were about to die. He stood, spoke to the wind and the waves, and there was a great calm. He did not apologize to the storm for stopping it. He did not ask the wind's permission before commanding it to be still. My beloved child, you do not need to negotiate with the very thing that tried to destroy you before you are allowed to walk in the calm that followed it. The storm does not get a vote in your healing. I also want to speak to the guilt you feel over the years you lost while you were only surviving, the relationships that suffered, the opportunities you were too depleted to take, the version of your career or your family life that might have looked different if you had not been fighting simply to stay alive. My beloved child, I do not require you to make up for lost time by punishing your present. The years the locust ate are not repaid through more suffering. They are repaid through restoration, and restoration cannot take root in a heart that is still apologizing for having needed to survive in the first place. Remember Joel's promise that I would restore the years the locust had eaten, the years the swarming locust, the crawling locust, the consuming locust had stripped bare. That promise was not conditional on you first, proving how sorry you were for the barren years. It was simply a promise, freely given, to a people who had lost far more than they understood how to grieve. My beloved child, receive that same promise now. I am not waiting for your apology before I begin restoring what those years took from you. There is also a subtler apology hidden inside your relationship with rest. You have treated rest as something you must earn through exhaustion, as if collapsing is the only acceptable doorway into peace. My beloved child, I did not design rest to be a reward you receive only after you have proven your suffering was severe enough. I designed the Sabbath as a rhythm, not a rescue. You are allowed to rest simply because you are mine, not because you have first collected enough evidence of struggle to justify lying down. Think of my son at the well in Samaria, tired from the journey, sitting down in the heat of the day before he ever spoke a single word of ministry to the woman who arrived to draw water. He rested first, plainly, without explaining himself to his disciples when they returned, surprised to find him talking with her. My beloved child, you do not owe anyone an explanation for the rest you take. Rest is not a confession that you have failed to keep pace. It is simply the honest posture of a body and soul that were never meant to run without pause. My beloved child, I want you to notice something about every apology we have named so far. Each one assumes that your existence, your healing, your peace, and your rest are somehow inconvenient to the people around you, and that you are responsible for managing that inconvenience. But you were never called to manage other people's discomfort with your becoming whole. You were called to walk faithfully with me, one day at a time, allowing the healing I have poured into you to simply be what it is without shrinking it to fit into rooms. I know it will feel strange at first to stop the small apologies you have offered so automatically that you no longer notice them. It will feel like walking without a familiar weight you had grown used to carrying. My beloved child, that strangeness is not a sign you are doing something wrong. It is simply the sensation of new muscles learning a posture they were never given the chance to practice before. Give yourself permission to feel awkward in your own uprightness for a while. Uprightness is still the truth of who I made you to be, even before it feels natural. Remember Mephibosheth, brought before King David, terrified, calling himself a dead dog because he assumed his lameness disqualified him from the king's table. David did not ask him to keep apologizing for his condition. David restored his inheritance and set a permanent place for him at the table, and Mephibosheth ate there continually, feet still unable to walk properly, seated among the king's own sons. My beloved child, whatever part of you still limps from the old season does not disqualify you from the table I have already set for you. You do not have to heal completely before you are welcome to sit down. I want to speak now to the fear that if you stop apologizing for surviving, you will become someone unbearable, someone proud, someone who has forgotten the valley. My beloved child, there is a vast difference between confidence rooted in what I did and arrogance rooted in what you did alone. Confidence remembers the valley and still says, I am no longer required to live there. Arrogance forgets the valley altogether and claims the climb as its own achievement. You are not in danger of becoming the second thing simply by refusing to keep apologizing for the first. There is a moment I want you to picture clearly. It is the moment right after you survived, when you were still shaking, still unsure the danger was really over, still checking behind you out of habit. That moment required humility and desperate honesty, and I met you there fully. But I did not design you to live permanently in that moment. I designed that moment to be a doorway, not a residence. My beloved child, if you have been living in the doorway long after I opened the room beyond it, I am inviting you now to walk all the way through. Remember the Israelites at the edge of the Jordan, finally standing at the border of the Promised Land after 40 years in the wilderness. They did not need to apologize to the wilderness for leaving it behind. They did not need to explain to the manna why they were about to eat the produce of a new land. My beloved child, the season that kept you alive is allowed to end. You do not owe it a farewell speech. You do not owe it continued loyalty simply because it is what you know. I want to address the specific moment when someone questions your healing, when they ask, gently or not so gently, whether you have really moved past what happened, whether your peace is genuine or simply a performance. My beloved child, you do not need to defend the authenticity of your own healing to anyone. My son did not defend his miracles to the Pharisees who demanded he prove himself further after already restoring sight to a man born blind. He let the healed man speak for himself, and the man simply said, "One thing I know, I was blind, and now I see." That single sentence was enough. It did not require an apology or an elaborate defense. You are allowed to answer questions about your healing with the same simplicity. You do not have to relive every detail of the wound to prove that the healing is real. Sometimes the shortest true sentence is the strongest witness you can give. I was in a dark place, and now I am not. I could not get out of bed, and now I can. I did not think I would survive that year, and I did. My beloved child, these sentences do not require elaboration to be credible. They are simply true, and truth does not need decoration to stand. I also want to speak to those who compare your recovery timeline to someone else's, suggesting you should still be further along or further behind than you are. My beloved child, I am not working from a universal calendar for healing. Joseph's promotion took 13 years from the pit to the palace. The woman with the issue of blood was healed in a single moment after 12 years of searching for answers. Naaman needed 7 dips in the Jordan, no more, no less. There is no single timeline that applies to every soul, and you do not need to apologize for the pace at which I have chosen to restore you. There is a final layer to this apology I want to name plainly, because I do not want it to remain hidden in you any longer. Somewhere inside you is the fear that if you stop apologizing for surviving, I myself might be disappointed in you, might think you have grown proud, might withdraw the closeness we have built through the hardest season. My beloved child, hear me. I am not the one who taught you to apologize for being alive. That voice did not come from me. I have never once required your suffering as the price of my presence. I am not more pleased with you when you are folded small. I am simply pleased with you, fully as you are, standing upright. Remember the father running to meet the returning son while he was still far off, before the son could finish his rehearsed apology. The father did not wait to hear the full confession before he embraced him. He saw him at a distance and ran. My beloved child, I am not waiting at a distance measuring how sorry you are for surviving before I run toward you. I have already been running toward you this entire message, and I am not asking for an apology when I arrive. I am asking you to let me hold you without flinching, without bracing, without the reflexive sorry that has lived on your tongue for so long. I want you to try something tonight, quietly, in whatever room you are sitting in right now. I want you to say out loud, or simply in your heart, if that is safer for you, I am not sorry that I survived. Let the sentence sit in the air. Notice if your chest tightens. Notice if an old voice rushes in to argue with it. Notice if tears surface that you did not expect. My beloved child, whatever rises in you as you say that sentence is simply the old apology loosening its grip. Let it loosen. You do not have to fight it. You only have to let it go. I know some of what you carry cannot be resolved in a single message, and I am not asking you to pretend it can. Healing is not a single sentence spoken once and finished. It is a return again and again to the truth until the truth finally outweighs the old habit. My beloved child, if you find yourself apologizing again tomorrow for the same things we have named tonight, do not add a second layer of guilt on top of the first. Simply notice it, gently correct it, and keep walking. Grace covers the slow unlearning as fully as it covered the original wound. I want to tell you what I see when I look at you now, because I do not think you have let yourself imagine it clearly. I see someone who is still standing after what tried to end them. I see someone who kept praying even in seasons when the prayers felt like they were bouncing off the ceiling. I see someone who chose, again and again, in small, unnoticed moments, to keep believing that morning might actually come. My beloved child, none of that required an apology. All of it required courage. And courage does not need to explain itself to anyone who has never had to use it. Remember Esther, who risked her life to approach the king unsummoned, uncertain whether she would be received or destroyed. She did not apologize for her fear as she prepared to walk into that throne room. She fasted, she prepared, and then she walked forward anyway. My beloved child, courage and fear can coexist in the same body at the same moment. You do not need to wait until fear disappears completely before you are allowed to walk forward without apology. You simply need to walk, trembling if necessary, the way Esther did. I want to speak now about the specific people who may have taught you, without cruelty, simply through their own wounds, that surviving loudly was dangerous. Perhaps a parent who needed you to stay small so they would not feel eclipsed. Perhaps a sibling whose own pain made your healing feel like a comparison they could not bear. Perhaps a friend group where struggle was the shared language, and thriving felt like abandoning the group's dialect. My beloved child, I am not asking you to blame them. I am asking you to recognize the pattern so you can finally set it down instead of repeating it in every new room you enter. There is a difference between honoring where you came from and staying chained to the smallness someone else needed from you. Joseph honored his father Jacob deeply for the rest of his life, weeping openly when he saw him again after so many years apart, providing for the entire family during the famine without resentment. But he did not shrink his position in Egypt to make his brothers comfortable with how far he had risen above the pit they had thrown him into. My beloved child, I want to speak plainly to the version of you who still keeps one hand near the door, waiting for this healing to be temporary, waiting for the other shoe to fall so you can say, I knew it. I should not have gotten used to this. My beloved child, that watchfulness was necessary once. It kept you alert during a season when danger really was close. But I am not asking you to keep watching the door in a house I have already secured. Peace is not naive simply because it is unguarded. Sometimes peace is unguarded because the threat is actually gone. Remember when my people finally crossed into the promised land and ate the produce of that ground for the first time, and the manna stopped falling the very next day? They did not mourn the manna. They did not apologize to the wilderness for no longer needing its provision. They simply ate what the new land offered and moved forward into what I had prepared. My beloved child, whatever sustained you through the wilderness season served its purpose faithfully, but you are not required to keep depending on wilderness provision once you have crossed into a new land. Let the manna stop. Eat what is actually in front of you now. I want to be honest with you about something that might sting a little, because I love you too much to leave it unsaid. Some of your apologizing has quietly become a way of controlling how others perceive you, a way of managing the narrative before anyone else can shape it without your permission. My beloved child, that instinct made sense when you were vulnerable and needed to protect yourself from being misunderstood in dangerous ways. But you no longer need to manage every room's perception of you as if your safety still depended on it. You are allowed to let people misunderstand you sometimes and remain steady anyway. Consider how my son responded when Pilate asked him whether he was the king of the Jews. He answered plainly, without over-explaining, without softening the truth to make Pilate more comfortable with it. He let the moment stand as it was, even though it led to suffering, because the truth mattered more than managing the room's reaction to it. My beloved child, I am not asking you to be reckless with the truth, but I am asking you to stop over-managing every reaction people might have to your healing. Some reactions are simply not yours to control. There is a specific kind of tiredness that comes from apologizing for your own life for years without realizing it. A tiredness that has nothing to do with lack of sleep and everything to do with the exhausting labor of making yourself smaller so consistently that it became automatic. My beloved child, I want to lift that particular weight off you tonight. Not because the people around you are wrong for having their own struggles, but because you were never meant to carry the responsibility of managing everyone's comfort with your survival as a permanent job. Remember the shepherds on the night my son was born, the ones who ran to Bethlehem after hearing the announcement of the angels, and then went back to their fields telling everyone what they had seen and heard. They did not soften the story to make it more palatable for skeptical neighbors. They told it plainly, glorifying and praising me for all they had heard and seen. My beloved child, you are allowed to tell your own story plainly, without softening this miracle in it, even if some people who hear it respond with doubt instead of wonder. I want to speak to the version of you that has quietly decided it is safer to expect the worst, so that disappointment never catches you off guard. This is another form of the same apology, a preemptive one, apologizing to fear itself in advance by refusing to hope too openly. My beloved child, hope is not naive, hope is not a liability. I did not carry you through what you survived, just so you could spend the rest of your life bracing for the next disaster instead of receiving the peace that followed the last one. Remember Abraham looking at the stars, being told that his descendants would outnumber them, an old man with an aging wife being asked to believe something that defied every visible circumstance. Scripture says he did not waver through unbelief but grew strong in faith, giving glory to me. My beloved child, growing strong in faith does not require you to ignore what you have survived. It simply requires you to stop letting what you survived write the ending of every future chapter before it has even begun. I want to gently address something else hidden beneath the apology. A fear that if you are no longer defined by your survival, you will not know who you are at all. My beloved child, your identity was never meant to rest on what almost destroyed you. It was always meant to rest on the one who carried you through it. When the storm is remembered only for the storm, identity becomes fragile, tied to something painful and temporary. When the storm is remembered as the place where my faithfulness became undeniable, identity becomes anchored in something that cannot be shaken loose again. Consider Jacob after wrestling through the night at Peniel, walking away with a permanent limp but also a new name, Israel, meaning one who struggles with God and prevails. He did not spend the rest of his life apologizing for the limp or hiding it from his family. He carried it as part of the story of an encounter that changed him permanently. My beloved child, whatever limp remains from your own wrestling season is allowed to simply be part of your story, without shame attached to it and without a constant explanation required. I want you to notice, as we come toward the close of this part of the message, how much lighter it might feel simply to imagine walking through tomorrow without the automatic apology attached to your existence. Imagine waking up and not immediately measuring how much space you are allowed to take up in the day ahead. Imagine receiving a compliment about your progress and simply saying thank you, without the reflexive deflection that usually follows. My beloved child, that lighter way of living is not a fantasy. It is available to you starting the next time you notice the old apology forming and choose, deliberately, to let it dissolve instead of speaking it. I will not ask you to become someone unrecognizable overnight. I am only asking you to begin noticing the small moments where the apology tries to slip in, and to replace it, even clumsily at first, with simple truth. Not sorry for going on about this, but thank you for listening. Not, I don't want to make a big deal of it, but this mattered, and I'm glad I can finally say so. My beloved child, these small substitutions repeated over time will retrain the reflex that years of smallness once trained into you. My beloved child, I have shown you tonight that you no longer need to apologize for the fact that you survived. And in the next part of this message, I want to show you something even deeper. I want to show you why the very thing you have been most ashamed of, the visible evidence of what you walked through, was never meant to be hidden at all, but was meant to become one of the clearest proofs of my faithfulness that you will ever carry. Stay with me a little longer, because there is more I want your heart to receive tonight. My beloved child, I told you that you no longer need to apologize for surviving. And now I want to speak to the scars themselves, the ones you have learned to hide beneath long sleeves of explanation whenever someone gets too close to asking about them. You have decided, somewhere along the way, that the marks left behind by what you walked through are evidence of a failure rather than evidence of an ending. My beloved child, a scar is not proof that something broke you. A scar is proof that something tried to break you and did not succeed. The wound closed, the body healed around it. You are still here. I want you to remember my son after the resurrection. appearing to his disciples in the upper room while Thomas was absent. When Thomas finally heard the report, he said he would not believe unless he could see the mark of the nails in his hands and put his finger into the wound in his side. My beloved child, notice something remarkable here. My son did not erase those marks when he rose. He could have appeared whole in every visible way, with no trace of what he had endured. Instead, he kept the wounds, and he used them as proof, an invitation for a doubting friend to reach out and touch the very place where suffering had done its worst and had still not won. When Thomas finally saw him and touched those marks, he did not recoil from them. He fell down and called him Lord and God. My beloved child, the scars did not repel Thomas from belief. They produced it. There is something in the visible evidence of survival that speaks louder than words ever could to someone who is still doubting whether restoration is real. Your scars, whatever form they take, whether visible on your skin or invisible in the quiet architecture of your personality, are not meant to be hidden away out of shame. They are meant to become, in their own time and in their own way. I know this feels like a heavy thing to hear tonight, because you have spent so long treating your scars as private property, evidence only for your own eyes, proof you would rather no one else examine too closely. My beloved child, I am not asking you to broadcast every wound to every stranger who crosses your path. Wisdom still applies. Not every scar needs to be shown to every audience. But I am asking you to stop treating the existence of the scar itself as something shameful, something that disqualifies you from being seen fully, something that must be managed and minimized before anyone gets too close. Remember Jacob again, walking with a permanent limp after wrestling through the night, a limp that would have been visible to everyone who watched him walk for the rest of his life. Scripture does not record him hiding that limp or explaining it away with elaborate cover stories. It simply became part of how people recognized him, this man who had wrestled with God and lived to tell about it. My beloved child, your limp, whatever form it takes, does not need an elaborate cover story either. It can simply be part of how people come to recognize the particular way I have worked in your life. I want to speak now about the specific fear that if people see your scars clearly, they will only ever see the wound and never the person standing beyond it. My beloved child, this fear assumes that people are far less capable of nuance than they actually are. Most people, when given the chance, can hold both truths at once, that you were wounded and that you are also whole, that something terrible happened and that something beautiful grew in its aftermath. You do not need to hide the wound entirely to protect people from an oversimplified reading of your story. You can trust that the fuller truth is available to those who take the time to actually know you. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from hiding your scars so completely that no one around you actually knows the depth of what you survived. You may be surrounded by people every day and still feel entirely alone, because the version of you they know is the curated, edited, presentable one, and the real story remains locked away where you believe it is safer. My beloved child, I did not design you for that kind of isolation. I designed you for the kind of connection that becomes possible only when the full truth of your story is finally allowed into the room. Remember the woman at the well again? The one my son spoke with in the heat of the day? The one who had been married 5 times and was currently living with a man who was not her husband. She did not hide that history from him, and rather than condemning her, he used the fullness of her story to reveal himself as the Messiah she had been waiting for. Afterward, she ran back into the very town where her reputation had likely followed her for years, and she told everyone, "Come see a man who told me everything I ever did." My beloved child, she did not hide her scars to protect her image. She used them as the very doorway through which an entire town came to encounter the truth. I know it feels risky to imagine your own story functioning that way, becoming a doorway instead of a locked room. But I want you to consider how many people around you are currently living inside a version of the same shame you once carried, believing that what happened to them disqualifies them from being fully known and fully loved. My beloved child, your willingness to let your scars be visible, in whatever measured and wise way feels right to you, can become the very thing that gives someone else permission to stop hiding their own. I want to be careful here because I do not want you to hear this as pressure to perform vulnerability before you are ready, or to share details with people who have not earned the trust required to hold them well. Wisdom discerns who is safe and who is not. Not every room deserves your full story, but I do want you to notice the difference between wise discretion and reflexive shame. Discretion says, this is not the right time or person for this story. Shame says, this story should never be told at all. My beloved child, I am only asking you to release the second voice, not to abandon the first. Remember Paul writing to the churches about the thorn in his flesh, a weakness he asked me 3 times to remove. I did not remove it. Instead, I told him that my grace was sufficient for him, that my strength is made perfect in weakness. And rather than hiding that thorn from the churches he wrote to, he told them plainly that he would boast all the more gladly about his weaknesses, so that the power of Christ could rest on him. My beloved child, Paul did not know the exact nature of his thorn's full detail to us today, because he chose discretion about its specifics. But he did not hide the fact that weakness existed in him at all. He simply refused to let it disqualify him from ministry, or from being fully known as someone who struggled and was still used mightily. There is a specific weight that lifts off a person the moment they stop managing every conversation to prevent someone from glimpsing the truth of what they walked through. My beloved child, I want that weight to lift off you. Not recklessly, not without wisdom, but genuinely. I want you to reach a place where the question, what happened to you, does not trigger panic, but instead meets a settled, steady answer, offered at whatever depth feels appropriate for the relationship, without the frantic internal calculation of how much damage the truth might do to how you are perceived. I also want to speak to the specific comparison that often accompanies scars, the temptation to look at someone who appears to have never struggled at all and to feel diminished by the contrast. My beloved child, you do not know the full story of anyone else's life simply by looking at their surface. Many people you assume have never struggled are simply skilled at the same hiding you have practiced for years. And even where someone truly has had an easier road, their ease does not diminish the value of what I built in you through the harder one. Gold refined through fire is not worth less than gold that was never tested. Remember the 3 men in the furnace, thrown in for refusing to bow to a golden image? Walking unbound in the flames alongside a 4th figure who appeared like a son of the gods. When they came out, the king noted that the fire had no power over their bodies, that not a hair of their heads was singed, their robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them at all. My beloved child, notice this detail carefully. They did not come out carrying the smell of the very thing that tried to destroy them. Sometimes my restoration is so complete that it removes even the evidence you expected to remain. But even when evidence does remain, as it did for my son after the resurrection, it becomes proof of my power, not proof of your defeat. I want you to hold both possibilities open in your heart tonight, because both are true depending on the specific wound we are discussing. Some things I heal so completely that not even the smell of smoke remains on you, and you will look back one day amazed at how thoroughly the evidence disappeared. Other things I heal in a way that leaves a visible mark, like the nail prints in my son's hands, and that mark becomes its own ministry, its own invitation for someone else to reach out and believe. My beloved child, either way, you are not required to be ashamed of what remains or what does not remain. Both are part of the same faithful work. There is a particular grief in realizing how many years you spent hiding a scar that could have comforted someone else far sooner, if only you had trusted that its visibility would not destroy you. My beloved child, I do not want you to spiral into regret over those hidden years. I want you to simply notice the pattern so you can release it now, today, in whatever relationships and rooms are in front of you currently. The years that already passed were not wasted. They were part of the slow work of preparing you to eventually be able to hold this truth without flinching. Remember blind Bartimaeus sitting by the roadside, calling out loudly for mercy, even as the crowd told him to be quiet. He did not hide his blindness or soften his need to make the crowd more comfortable. He shouted louder, and when my son called for him, he threw off his cloak, the very garment that likely marked him as a beggar, and came running. My beloved child, sometimes the visible marker of your old identity, the cloak that announced your former condition to everyone who saw it, is meant to be thrown off entirely once you are called forward into something new. You do not need to keep wearing the evidence of the old seasons simply out of habit. I want to bring these two truths together clearly before we move forward. You are not required to hide your scars out of shame, and you are also not required to keep displaying old garments that no longer belong to who I am calling you to become. Discernment will teach you the difference over time, moment by moment, relationship by relationship. Some scars become part of your ongoing testimony. Some old identities, like Bartimaeus' cloak, are simply meant to be thrown off and left behind entirely. My beloved child, I also want to speak to the fear that if you let your scars be visible, people will forever define you by the worst thing that happened to you, rather than by who you have become since. My beloved child, some people will do exactly that, and there is very little you can do to control it. But notice that this fear, if allowed to rule you, will keep you hiding indefinitely, waiting for a guarantee of perfect reception that will never come. I am not asking you to guarantee how everyone responds. I am asking you to trust that enough people, the right people, will see the fuller truth if you allow them the chance to. Remember Rahab, a woman with a reputation that followed her long before the spies ever knocked on her door in Jericho. She hid them. She confessed faith in me even before her own city fell, and generations later she is named in the genealogy of my son himself, listed openly among ancestors whose stories were far from perfect. My beloved child, I did not hide her history when I recorded that lineage. I let it stand, plainly, as part of the story of how grace reaches into complicated places and writes something holy out of them. Your history, whatever shape it takes, is not too complicated for me to use in exactly the same way. There is a final piece I want to add here before we move into the next part of this message. Some of your scars are not from what happened to you, but from what you had to do in order to survive. Choices made under pressure, words spoken in seasons of desperation, decisions you would not make again now that you have clarity you did not have then. My beloved child, I want you to release the shame attached to those particular scars as fully as the shame attached to the ones that were simply done to you. Survival sometimes requires imperfect choices, and I am not measuring your worth by the cleanliness of every decision you made while trying to stay alive. Remember Peter, denying my son 3 times in the very courtyard where he had sworn moments earlier that he would never do such a thing, weeping bitterly the moment the rooster crowed and he remembered the prediction. That denial could have permanently disqualified him. Instead, my risen son sought him out personally by the shore, asked him 3 times whether he loved him, once for each denial, and then commissioned him to feed his sheep. My beloved child, whatever choices you made under the pressure of your own survival, however ashamed you remain of them, I am not finished restoring you the way I was not finished restoring Peter. Restoration reaches into the specific shape of your failure and rebuilds exactly there. I want to close this part of the message by simply reminding you of what your scars actually represent when I look at them, because I suspect it is quite different from what you have believed for a long time. When I look at your scars, I do not see failure. I see the specific place where my hand held you when you could not hold yourself. I see the exact location where mercy met desperation and desperation did not win. I see evidence, not of weakness, but of a battle that ended in your favor, even when the ending did not look the way you expected it to look. My beloved child, you have carried these marks as if they were a debt you owed an explanation for. Tonight I am telling you they are a receipt. Proof of payment already made, proof that whatever tried to collect your life did not succeed in collecting it. You do not owe anyone the full story of how that receipt was earned, but you also do not have to keep hiding the receipt itself as if its existence were something shameful. It is simply proof that you are still here, and that I was the one who kept you here. I want to give you something practical to carry forward from this part of the message. The next time you catch yourself hiding a scar, whether physical or invisible, out of automatic shame, pause for just a moment and ask yourself a simple question. Is this hiding wisdom, or is this hiding shame? If it is wisdom, discerning that this particular room or relationship is not yet ready to hold this particular truth, then trust that discernment and wait for the right timing. But if it is shame, whispering that the truth itself is disqualifying, I want you to gently set that whisper down, the same way you are learning to set down the automatic apology we named earlier tonight. My beloved child, I have shown you tonight that your scars were never meant to be a source of shame but a form of testimony carried wisely, offered selectively, but never hidden out of the belief that they disqualify you from being fully known. And in the next part of this message, I want to show you something further, something about the specific weight of comparison that has followed you for years, the quiet habit of measuring your healing against someone else's timeline, someone else's ease, someone else's applause. Stay with me a little longer, because I am not finished restoring what needs to be restored in you tonight. My beloved child, I have shown you that your scars are not a source of shame, and now I want to speak directly to the comparison that has quietly shaped so much of how you view your own life. You have spent years measuring your progress against people whose starting point was never the same as yours, whose battles were invisible to you, whose apparent ease may have cost them something you never saw. My beloved child, comparison is a thief that steals the specific gift I gave you and replaces it with a counterfeit standard you were never meant to meet. Remember Peter again, this time after his restoration by the shore, when he turned and saw John following behind, and asked my son, "Lord, what about him?" My son's answer was direct. "If I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me." My beloved child, I am asking you the same question tonight about whoever it is you have been comparing your healing to, your career to, your family's timeline to, your visible progress to. What is that to you? Your assignment is to follow me, not to match the pace of someone whose calling was never identical to yours. I know this comparison often shows up disguised as gratitude, the voice that says, "I should be more thankful. Look how much further along they are." My beloved child, gratitude and comparison are not the same thing, even though they can sound similar at first. Gratitude looks at your own life and says, "Thank you for what you have done here." Comparison looks at someone else's life and says, "I should be further, I should be more, I am behind." I am not asking you to stop being grateful. I am asking you to notice when gratitude has quietly turned into a measuring stick pointed at yourself. Consider the laborers in the vineyard, some hired at the first hour of the day, others hired late in the afternoon, all of them receiving the same wage at the end of the day, regardless of how long they had worked. The ones hired first grumbled, believing they deserved more because they had labored longer. The landowner's response was simple. "Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own money? Or is your eye evil because I am generous?" My beloved child, I am not being unfair to you by giving someone else an easier road, a faster breakthrough, a shorter valley. My generosity toward them does not subtract anything from what I have already given you. I want to speak specifically to the comparison you make with your own past self, the version of you that existed before whatever broke you, the version you sometimes long to return to as if healing simply meant restoring that exact former self. My beloved child, I am not rebuilding you into who you were before. I am building you into who you are becoming after everything you have walked through. The old version of you did not carry what you now carry. It did not know what you now know. Healing is not a return trip. It is a forward journey into someone shaped by everything that happened, not despite it. Remember how Job's story ends, restored with double what he had before, but notably, the text tells us he had exactly the same number of children as before, 7 sons and 3 daughters, not double children, only double possessions. Some things I restore in greater measure than before. Some things I restore in the same measure, precious and complete, but not doubled, because the value was never in the quantity to begin with. My beloved child, do not measure your restoration only by whether it exceeds what was lost. Some restorations are simply complete, precious exactly as they are, without needing to be doubled to be considered enough. I want to address the comparison that happens specifically around timing, the fear that you are somehow late, that other people your age, in your field, in your family, have reached milestones you have not yet reached, and that this lateness itself is evidence something is wrong with you or with my plan for you. My beloved child, I am not bound by the milestones your culture has decided matter most. Sarah was 90 years old when Isaac was born. Decades passed when the world would have said her window had closed. I am not asking you to accept lateness as a permanent condition, but I am asking you to release the specific anxiety. I want to speak to the calling that looks nothing like what you expected it to look like. The quiet, unglamorous, undramatic version of purpose that shows up in ordinary conversations, small acts of consistency, faithful presence in unremarkable rooms. My beloved child, do not despise the small shape your calling has taken simply because it does not match the large, public version you once imagined. My son spent 30 years in obscurity in Nazareth before 3 years of public ministry. The obscure years were not wasted preparation. They were the foundation the public years stood on. Consider the widow who gave 2 small coins into the temple treasury, an amount so small it would have gone unnoticed by everyone in the room except my son, who pointed out that she had given more than all the wealthy contributors combined, because she gave out of her poverty everything she had to live on. My beloved child, your small, seemingly insignificant faithfulness, the phone call you made to check on someone, the encouragement you offered when you barely had strength for your own day, is not being overlooked simply because it does not look like the grand gestures other people are making. I see the widow's coin. I see yours too. I want to speak now to the specific way survival taught you compassion that theory alone could never teach. You know how to sit with someone in the dark because you have been in the dark. You know how to avoid empty cliches because empty cliches never actually helped you when you needed real comfort. You know the exact weight of silence that says, "I see you," versus the silence that says, "I don't know what to do with you," because you have received both kinds from different people during your own hardest seasons. My beloved child, this discernment is not something you could have learned any other way. It had to be earned, and it was earned through exactly what you survived. Remember Paul, describing me as the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction, with the comfort we ourselves have received from me. My beloved child, this is not a coincidental byproduct of your suffering. It is the actual design. I did not simply allow you to suffer and then, as an afterthought, decide it might be useful someday. I built into the very structure of comfort itself the requirement that it flow through someone who has actually needed it, so that it would never come from a place of theory, but always from a place of lived truth. I want to be careful here, because I do not want you to hear this as a suggestion that I caused your suffering simply to produce a useful skill in you afterward. That is not the shape of my heart, and it never has been. Much of what you survived came from a broken world, from other people's choices, from the simple reality of living in a place still waiting for full restoration. But even where the suffering itself was not my design, the redemption of it always has been. I take what was never meant to happen and I weave it, patiently, into something that serves a purpose you could not have written for yourself. Remember Joseph's own words to his brothers, years after the pit and the slavery and the false imprisonment. "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring about that many people should be kept alive." My beloved child, notice that Joseph did not say the evil was actually good, or that it did not really hurt, or that his brothers were secretly right to do what they did. He named the evil plainly as evil, and in the very same breath, he named what I had done with it as good. Both statements were true at once, without contradiction. Your suffering can be named honestly as suffering, and my redemption of it can be named honestly as good, and neither truth erases the other. I want to speak to the specific worry that if you fully step into whatever calling has been forming inside your survival, you might somehow be defined forever by your wound, trapped permanently in the role of the one who suffered, rather than being seen as someone with a full, complex, ongoing life beyond that single chapter. My beloved child, this is a real risk if you allow the wound to become the entire identity rather than simply the entry point into a much larger story. Joseph did not spend the rest of his life only ever discussing the pit. He became a father, a governor, a strategist, a reconciler of his own family. The pit was where the story started, not where it ended or where it stayed frozen. I want to encourage you to imagine your own calling the same way, not as a permanent loop replaying the worst chapter of your life, but as a doorway that led into something much larger, where the worst chapter becomes simply the first page of a book, with many more chapters still being written. My beloved child, you are allowed to grow beyond the wound that first opened the door, even while still honoring that the door exists because of what you walked through. I want to close this section with a simple, direct word about timing. You do not need to have your calling fully mapped out tonight. You do not need to know exactly how the years of survival will translate into the specific shape of what comes next. My beloved child, I am asking you only to stop believing that those years were empty, wasted, purposeless. They were not. Something was being formed in you the entire time, even when it felt like nothing was happening at all, except the daily labor of staying alive. Trust that formation. The shape of its use will become clearer as you keep walking. My beloved child, I have shown you that your calling was quietly forming even in the years you thought were only about survival. And now, as we come toward the close of this message, I want to speak one final word directly to your future, to the version of you that will wake up tomorrow and have to decide, again, whether to keep living small or to finally walk forward without the apology we named at the very beginning of this letter. Tomorrow morning, when your alarm sounds and the ordinary weight of your ordinary day returns, I want you to remember this conversation, not as a temporary emotional high that fades by breakfast, but as a genuine shift in how you carry yourself through the world. My beloved child, you are not required to apologize for surviving. You are not required to hide the scars that prove you made it through. You are not required to measure your healing against anyone else's timeline. And you are not required to believe that the years you spent simply staying alive were empty of purpose. I know old habits do not dissolve in a single night simply because they have been named clearly. My beloved child, if you find yourself apologizing again tomorrow, or hiding again next week, or comparing again next month, do not let that become a new reason for shame layered on top of the old one. Simply return here, to this truth, as many times as you need to. I am not tired of reminding you. I am not counting how many times you need to hear it before it finally settles all the way into your bones. Grace repeats itself as often as necessary. Remember that everything we have walked through tonight, the apology you no longer need to offer, the scars you no longer need to hide, the comparison you no longer need to carry, and the calling that was quietly forming the entire time, all of it rests on one simple foundation. I have been with you every single day of the story you thought you were walking alone. Every apology you rehearsed I heard, and I was not offended by your existence. Every scar you hid I saw, and I was not repelled by what remained. Every comparison that exhausted you, I noticed, and I was already preparing to lift the weight of it from your shoulders. My beloved child, stop apologizing for surviving. Stand up straight in the room. Let your joy take up the space it deserves. Let your healing be loud enough for someone else to notice. Not because you are performing for an audience, but because a candle that has been relit does not need to whisper about the fact that it is finally burning again. You lived. You are still here. And I am not asking you to explain that to anyone. Walk into tomorrow the way Lazarus walked out of the tomb, called by name, grave clothes being loosed by the very people who once only knew you as someone who was gone. Walk into tomorrow the way the woman at the well walked back into her town, no longer managing what people thought of her past, simply telling the truth of what had changed. Walk into tomorrow the way Joseph walked into the palace, not erasing the pit, but no longer shrinking his rise because of it. My beloved child, I am walking with you into every one of those rooms. This is not the end of what I want to say to you. There is more healing ahead, more truth to uncover, more freedom waiting in the places you have not yet let me reach. But for tonight, let this be enough. Let this be the moment you stopped saying sorry for the very thing that proves my faithfulness most clearly, the simple, undeniable fact that you are still here. My beloved child, you are not a burden for having survived. You are a testimony. Carry it without apology, and carry it with me every single day, for as long as it takes for this truth